"They're like a fox's eyes when the beast's in a trap," said the farmer. "Oh, let me try," Bobby went on. "I do really know one or two French words if I could only think of them. Sometimes in moments of great need, we can do wonderful things that in ordinary life we could hardly even dream of doing." Bobby had never been anywhere near the top of her French class, but she must have learned something without knowing it, for now, looking at those wild, hunted eyes, she actually remembered and, what is more, spoke some French words. She said, "Vous attendre, mamir parles français." "Nous, what's the French for being kind?" Nobody knew. "Bong is good," said Phyllis. "Nous être bon pour vous." I do not know whether the man understood her words, but he understood the touch of the hand she thrust into his, and the kindness of the other hand that stroked his shabby sleeve. She pulled him gently towards the inmost sanctuary of the station. "Master." The other children followed, and the station master shut the door in the face of the crowd, which stood a little while in the booking office, talking and looking at the fast-closed yellow door, and then by ones and twos went its way, grumbling. Inside the station master's room, Bobby still held the stranger's hand and stroked his sleeve. "Here's a go," said the station master. "No ticket, doesn't even know where he wants to go. I'm not sure now but what I ought to send for the police." "Oh, don't." All the children pleaded at once. And suddenly, Bobby got between the others and the stranger, for she had seen that he was crying. By a most unusual piece of good fortune, she had a handkerchief in her pocket. By a still more uncommon accident, the handkerchief was moderately clean. Standing in front of the stranger, she got out the handkerchief and passed it to him so that the others did not see. "Wait till Mother comes," Phyllis was saying. "She does speak French beautifully. You'd just love to hear her." "I'm sure he hasn't done anything like you're sent to prison for," said Peter. "Looks like without visible means to me," said the station master. "Well, I don't mind giving him the benefit of the doubt till your mama comes. I should like to know what nation's got the credit of him that I should." Then Peter had an idea. He pulled an envelope out of his pocket and showed that it was half full of foreign stamps. "Look here," he said. "Let's show him these." Bobby looked and saw that the stranger had dried his eyes with her handkerchief. So she said, "All right." They showed him an Italian stamp and pointed from him to it and back again and made signs of question with their eyebrows. He shook his head. Then they showed him a Norwegian stamp, the common blue kind it was, and again he signed no. They showed him a Spanish one, and at that he took the envelope from Peter's hand and searched among the stamps with a hand that trembled. The hand that he reached out at last, with a gesture as of one answering a question, contained a Russian stamp. "He's Russian," cried Peter, "or else he's like the man who was in Kipling, you know." The train from Maybridge was signaled. "I'll stay with him till you bring Mother in," said Bobby. "You're not afraid, Missy?" "Oh, no," said Bobby, looking at the stranger, as she might have looked at a strange dog of doubtful temper. "You wouldn't hurt me, would you?" She smiled at him, and he smiled back, a queer crooked smile. And then he coughed again, and the heavy rattling swish of the incoming train swept past, and the station master and Peter and Phyllis went out to meet it. Bobby was still holding the stranger's hand when they came back with Mother. The Russian rose and bowed. "Very CEREMONIOUSLY. Then Mother spoke in French, and he replied, haltingly at first, but presently in longer and longer sentences. The children, watching his face and Mother's, knew that he was telling her things that made her angry and pitying, and sorry and indignant all at once. "Well, Mum, what's it all about?" The station master could not restrain his curiosity any longer. "Oh," said Mother, "it's all right. He's a Russian, and he's lost his ticket, and I'm afraid he's very ill. If you don't mind, I'll take him home with me now. He's really quite worn out, I'll run down and tell you all about him tomorrow. I hope you won't find you're taking home a frozen viper, said the station master doubtfully. Oh no, Mother said brightly, and she smiled. I'm quite sure I'm not. Why, he's a great man in his own country. Writes books, beautiful books. I've read some of them. But I'll tell you all about it tomorrow. She spoke again in French to the Russian, and everyone could see the surprise and pleasure and gratitude in his eyes. He got up and politely bowed to the station master and offered his arm most ceremoniously to Mother. She took it, but anybody could have seen that she was helping him along, and not he her. You girls run home and light a fire in the sitting room, Mother said, and Peter had better go for the doctor. But it was Bobby who went for the doctor. I hate to tell you, she said breathlessly when she came upon him in his shirt sleeves, weeding his pansy bed, but Mother's got a very shabby Russian, and I'm sure he'll have to belong to your club. I'm certain he hasn't got any money. We found him at the station. Found him. Was he lost then? Asked the doctor, reaching for his coat. Yes, said Bobby unexpectedly. That's just what he was. He's been telling Mother the sad, sweet story of his life in French. And she said, would you be kind enough to come directly if you were at home? He has a dreadful cough, and he's been crying. The doctor smiled. Oh, don't, said Bobby. Please don't. You wouldn't if you'd seen him. I never saw a man cry before. You don't know what it's like. Dr. Forrest wished then that he hadn't smiled. When Bobby and the doctor got to Three Chimneys, the Russian was sitting in the armchair that had been Father's, stretching his feet to the blaze of a bright wood fire and sipping the tea Mother had made him. The man seems worn out, mind and body, was what the doctor said. The cough's bad, but there's nothing that can't be cured. He ought to go straight to bed, though, and let him have a fire at night. I'll make one in my room. It's the only one with a fireplace, said Mother. She did, and presently the doctor helped the stranger to bed. There was a big black trunk in Mother's room that none of the children had ever seen unlocked. Now, when she had lighted the fire, she unlocked it and took some clothes out, men's clothes, and set them to air by the newly lighted fire. Bobby, coming in with more wood for the fire, saw the mark on the nightshirt and looked over to the open trunk. All the things she could see were men's clothes, and the name marked on the shirt was Father's name. Then Father hadn't taken his clothes with him, and that nightshirt was one of Father's new ones. Bobby remembered its being made just before Peter's birthday. Why hadn't Father taken his clothes? Bobby slipped from the room. As she went, she heard the key turned in the lock of the trunk. Her heart was beating horribly. Why hadn't Father taken his clothes? When Mother came out of the room, Bobby flung tightly clasping arms round her waist and whispered, Mother, Daddy isn't dead, is he? My darling, no. What made you think of anything so horrible? I don't know, said Bobby, angry with herself, but still clinging to that resolution of hers, not to see anything that Mother didn't mean her to see. That Mother gave her a hurried hug. Daddy was quite quite well when I heard from him last, she said, and he'll come back to us someday. Don't fancy such horrible things, darling. Later on, when the Russian stranger had been made comfortable for the night, Mother came into the girl's room. She was to sleep there in Phyllis's bed, and Phyllis was to have a mattress on the floor, a most amusing adventure for Phyllis. Directly Mother came in, two white figures started up, and two eager voices called, Now, Mother, tell us all about the Russian gentleman. A white shape hopped into the room. It was Peter, dragging his quilt behind him like the tail of a white peacock. We have been patient, he said, and I had to bite my tongue not to go to sleep, and I just nearly went to sleep, and I bit too hard, and it hurts ever so. Do tell us. Make a nice long story of it. I can't make a long story of it tonight, said Mother. I'm very tired. Bobby knew by her voice that Mother had been crying, but the others didn't know. Well, make it as long as you can, said Phil, and Bobby got her arms round Mother's waist and snuggled close to her. Well, it's a story long enough to make a whole book of. He's a writer. He's written beautiful books. In Russia, at the time of the Tsar I, dared not say anything about the rich people doing wrong, or about the things that ought to be done to make poor people better and happier. If one did, one was sent to prison. But they can't, said Peter. People only go to prison when they've done wrong. Or when the judges think they've done wrong, said Mother. Yes, that's so in England. But in Russia, it was different. And he wrote a beautiful book about poor people and how to help them. I've read it. There's nothing in it but goodness and kindness. And they sent him to prison for it. He was 3 years in a horrible dungeon, with hardly any light, and all damp and dreadful. In prison all alone for 3 years. Mother's voice trembled a little and stopped suddenly. But Mother, said Peter, that can't be true now. It sounds like something out of a history book, the Inquisition, or something. It was true, said Mother. It's all horribly true. Well, then they took him out and sent him to Siberia. A convict chained to other convicts, wicked men who'd done all sorts of crimes, a long chain of them. And they walked and walked and walked for days and weeks, till he thought they'd never stop walking. And overseers went behind them with whips. Yes, whips to beat them if they got tired. And some of them went lame, and some fell down, and when they couldn't get up and go on, they beat them, and then left them to die. Oh, it's all too terrible. And at last he got to the mines, and he was condemned to stay there for life, just for writing a good, noble, splendid book. How did he get away? When the war came, some of the Russian prisoners were allowed to volunteer as soldiers. And he volunteered. But he deserted at the first chance he got. And, that's very cowardly, isn't it? Said Peter. To desert? Especially when it's war. Do you think he owed anything to a country that had done that to him? If he did, he owed more to his wife and children. He didn't know what had become of them. Oh, cried Bobby. He had them to think about and be miserable about too. Then, all the time he was in prison? Yes, he had them to think about and be miserable about all the time he was in prison. For anything he knew, they might have been sent to prison too. They did those things in Russia. But while he was in the mines, some friends managed to get a message to him that his wife and children had escaped and come to England. So when he deserted, he came here to look for them. Had he got their address? Sighed practical Peter. No, just England. He was going to London, and he thought he had to change at our station. And then he found he'd lost his ticket and his purse. Oh, do you think he'll find them? I mean his wife and children, not the ticket and things. I hope so. Oh, I hope and pray that he'll find his wife and children again. Even Phyllis now perceived that Mother's voice was very unsteady. Why, Mother, she said, how very sorry you seem to be for him. Mother didn't answer for a minute. Then she just said, yes, and then she seemed to be thinking. The children were quiet. Presently she said, dears, when you say your prayers, I think you might ask God to show his pity upon all prisoners and captives. To show his pity, Bobby repeated slowly, upon all prisoners and captives. Is that right, Mother? Yes, said Mother, upon all prisoners and captives. All prisoners and captives. The Russian gentleman was better the next day. And the day after that better still. And on the third day, he was well enough to come into the garden. A basket chair was put for him, and he sat there, dressed in clothes of Father's, which were too big for him. But when Mother had hemmed up the ends of the sleeves and the trousers, the clothes did well enough. His was a kind face now that it was no longer tired and frightened, and he smiled at the children whenever he saw them. They wished very much that he could speak English. Mother wrote several letters to people she thought might know whereabouts in England a Russian gentleman's wife and family might possibly be. Not to the people she used to know before she came to live at Three Chimneys. She never wrote to any of them, but strange people, members of parliament and editors of papers, and secretaries of societies. And she did not do much of her story writing. Only corrected proofs as she sat in the sun near the Russian, and talked to him every now and then. The children wanted very much to show how kindly they felt to this man who had been sent to prison, and to Siberia just for writing a beautiful book about poor people. They could smile at him, of course. They could, and they did. But if you smile too constantly, the smile is apt to get fixed like the smile of the hyena. And then it no longer looks friendly, but simply silly. So they tried other ways, and brought him flowers till the place where he sat was surrounded by little, fading bunches of clover and roses and Canterbury bells. And then Phyllis had an idea. She beckoned mysteriously to the others, and drew them into the backyard, and there, in a concealed spot, between the pump and the water butt, she said, "You remember Perks promising me the very first strawberries out of his own garden?" Perks, you will recollect, was the porter. "Well, I should think they're ripe now. Let's go down and see." Mother had been down, as she had promised to tell the station master the story of the Russian prisoner. But even the charms of the railway had been unable to tear the children away from the neighborhood of the interesting stranger. So they had not been to the station for 3 days. They went now, and, to their surprise and distress, were very coldly received by Perks. "Highly honored, I'm sure," he said when they peeped in at the door of the porter's room. And he went on reading his newspaper. There was an uncomfortable silence. "Oh, dear," said Bobby, with a sigh. "I do believe you're cross." "What, me?" "Not me," said Perks loftily. "It ain't nothing to me." "What ain't nothing?" "To you," said Peter, too anxious and alarmed to change the form of words. "Nothing ain't nothing." "What happens either ere or elsewhere," said Perks. "If you likes to ave your secrets, ave 'em and welcome. That's what I say." The secret chamber of each heart was rapidly examined during the pause that followed. 3 heads were shaken. "We haven't got any secrets from you," said Bobby at last. "Maybe you ave, and maybe you aven't," said Perks. "It ain't nothing to me. And I wish you all a very good afternoon." He held up the paper between him and them, and went on reading. "Oh, don't," said Phyllis, in despair. "This is truly dreadful. Whatever it is, do tell us. We didn't mean to do it, whatever it was." No answer. The paper was refolded, and Perks began on another column. "Look here," said Peter, suddenly. "It's not fair. Even people who do crimes aren't punished without being told what it's for, as once they were in Russia." "I don't know nothing about Russia." "Oh, yes, you do. When Mother came down on purpose to tell you and Mr. Gills all about oh, you are Russian. Can't you fancy it?" said Perks, indignantly. "Don't you see Emma asking of me to step into his room, and take a chair, and listen to what her ladyship has to say? Do you mean to say you've not heard? Not so much as a breath. I did go so far as to put a question, and he shuts me up like a rat trap. 'Affairs of state, Perks,' says he. But I did think you would nip down to tell me. You're here sharp enough when you want to get anything out of old Perks." Phyllis flushed purple as she thought of the strawberries, information about locomotives, or signals, or the likes, said Perks. "We didn't know you didn't know. We thought Mother had told you." The 3 spoke all at once. Perks said it was all very well, and still held up the paper. Then Phyllis suddenly snatched it away, and threw her arms round his neck. "Oh, let's kiss and be friends," she said. We'll say we're sorry first, if you like, but we didn't really know that you didn't know. We are so sorry, said the others, and Perks at last consented to accept their apologies. Then they got him to come out and sit in the sun, on the green railway bank, where the grass was quite hot to touch, and there, sometimes speaking one at a time, and sometimes all together, they told the porter the story of the Russian prisoner. Well, I must say, said Perks. But he did not say it, whatever it was. Yes, it is pretty awful, isn't it? Said Peter. And I don't wonder you were curious about who the Russian was. I wasn't curious, not so much as interested, said the porter. Well, I do think Mr. Gills might have told you about it. It was horrid of him. I don't keep no down on him for that, missy, said the porter. 'Cause why? I see his reasons. He wouldn't want to give away his own side with a tale like that, there. It ain't human nature. A man's got to stand up for his own side, whatever they does. That's what it means by party politics. I should, done the same myself, if that long-haired chap had, been in Japanese. But the Japanese didn't do cruel, wicked things. Like that, said Bobby. Perhaps not, said Perks, cautiously. Still, you can't be sure with foreigners. My own belief is they're all tarred with the same brush. Then why were you on the side of the Japanese? Peter asked. Well, you see, you must take one side or the other. Same as with liberals and conservatives. The great thing is to take your side and then stick to it, whatever happens. A signal sounded. There's the 3.14 up, said Perks. You lie low till she's through, and then we'll go up along to my place, and see if there's any of them strawberries ripe, what I told you about. If there are any ripe, and you do give them to me, said Phyllis. You won't mind if I give them to the poor Russian, will you? Perks narrowed his eyes and then raised his eyebrows. So it was them strawberries you come down for this afternoon, eh? Said he. This was an awkward moment for Phyllis. To say yes would seem rude and greedy, and unkind to Perks, but she knew if she said no, she would not be pleased with herself afterwards. So, yes, she said, it was. Well done, said the porter. Speak the truth. And shame the... But we'd have come down the very next day if we'd known you hadn't heard the story. Phyllis added hastily, I believe you, missy, said Perks, and sprang across the line 6 feet in front of the advancing train. The girls hated to see him do this, but Peter liked it. It was so exciting. The Russian gentleman was so delighted with the strawberries that the three racked their brains to find some other surprise for him. But all the racking did not bring out any idea more novel than wild cherries. And this idea occurred to them next morning. They had seen the blossom on the trees in the spring, and they knew where to look for wild cherries now that cherry time was here. The trees grew all up and along the rocky face of the cliff, out of which the mouth of the tunnel opened. There were all sorts of trees there, birches and beeches and baby oaks and hazels, and among them the cherry blossom had shone like snow. And Silver Dot, the mouth of the tunnel, was some way from 3 chimneys, so Mother let them take their lunch with them in a basket, and the basket would do to bring the cherries back in if they found any. She also lent them her silver watch so that they should not be late for tea. Peter's Waterbury had taken it into its head not to go since the day when Peter dropped it into the water butt, and they started. When they got to the top of the cutting, they leaned over the fence and looked down to where the railway lines lay at the bottom of what, as Phyllis said, was exactly like a mountain gorge. If it wasn't for the railway at the bottom, it would be as though the foot of man had never been there, wouldn't it? The sides of the cutting were of gray stone, very roughly hewn. Indeed, the top part of the cutting had been a little natural glen that had been cut deeper to bring it down to the level of the tunnel's mouth. Among the rocks, grass and flowers grew, and seeds dropped by birds in the crannies of the stone. had taken root and grown into bushes and trees that overhung the cutting. Near the tunnel was a flight of steps leading down to the line, just wooden bars roughly fixed into the earth. A very steep and narrow way, more like a ladder than a stair. "We'd better get down," said Peter. "I'm sure the cherries would be quite easy to get at from the side of the steps. You remember it was there we picked the cherry blossoms that we put on the rabbit's grave." So they went along the fence towards the little swing gate that is at the top of these steps. And they were almost at the gate when Bobby said, "Hush, stop, what's that?" That was a very odd noise, indeed a soft noise, but quite plainly to be heard through the sound of the wind in tree branches, and the hum and whir of the telegraph wires. It was a sort of rustling, whispering sound. As they listened, it stopped, and then it began again, and this time it did not stop, but it grew louder and more rustling and rumbling. "Asterisk, look!" cried Peter. Suddenly, the tree over there. The tree he pointed at was one of those that have rough gray leaves and white flowers. The berries, when they come, are bright scarlet, but if you pick them, they disappoint you by turning black before you get them home. And as Peter pointed, the tree was moving, not just the way trees ought to move when the wind blows through them, but all in one piece, as though it were a live creature and were walking down the side of the cutting. "It's moving!" cried Bobby. "Oh, look, and so are the others. It's like the woods in Macbeth." "It's magic," said Phyllis breathlessly. "I always knew this railway was enchanted." It really did seem a little like magic. For all the trees about 20 yards of the opposite bank seemed to be slowly walking down towards the railway line, the tree with the gray leaves bringing up the rear like some old shepherd driving a flock of green sheep. "What is it? Oh, what is it?" said Phyllis. "It's much too magic for me. I don't like it. Let's go home." But Bobby and Peter clung fast to the rail and watched breathlessly. And Phyllis made no movement towards going home by herself. The trees moved on and on. Some stones and loose earth fell down and rattled on the railway metals far below. "A-L-L coming down," Peter tried to say, but he found there was hardly any voice to say it with. And indeed, just as he spoke, the great rock, on the top of which the walking trees were, leaned slowly forward. The trees, ceasing to walk, stood still and shivered. Leaning with the rock, they seemed to hesitate a moment, and then rock and trees and grass and bushes, with a rushing sound, slipped right away from the face of the cutting and fell on the line with a blundering crash that could have been heard half a mile off. A cloud of dust rose up. "Oh," said Peter in awestruck tones, "isn't it exactly like when coals come in? If there wasn't any roof to the cellar, and you could see down. Look what a great mound it's made," said Bobby. "Yes," said Peter slowly. He was still leaning on the fence. "Yes," he said again, still more slowly then he stood upright. "The 11.29 down hasn't gone by yet. We must let them know at the station, or there'll be a most frightful accident." "Let's run," said Bobby, and began. But Peter cried, "Come back," and looked at Mother's watch. He was very prompt and businesslike, and his face looked whiter than they had ever seen it. "No time," he said. "It's 2 miles away, and it's past 11. "Couldn't we," suggested Phyllis, breathlessly, "couldn't we climb up a telegraph post and do something to the wires?" "We don't know how," said Peter. "They do it in war," said Phyllis. "I know, I've heard of it." "They only cut them silly," said Peter, "and that doesn't do any good. And we couldn't cut them even if we got up, and we couldn't get up. If we had anything red, we could get down on the line and wave it. But the train wouldn't see us till it got round the corner, and then it could see the mound just as well as us," said Phyllis. "Better, because it's much bigger than us." "If we only had something red," Peter repeated, "we could go round the corner and wave to the train." We might wave anyway. They'd only think it was just us, as usual. We've waved so often before. Anyway, let's get down. They got down the steep stairs. Bobby was pale and shivering. Peter's face looked thinner than usual. Phyllis was red-faced and damp with anxiety. "Oh, how hot I am," she said. "And I thought it was going to be cold. I wish we hadn't put on our—" She stopped short, and then ended in quite a different tone. "Our flannel petticoats." Bobby turned at the bottom of the stairs. "Oh, yes," she cried. "They're red. Let's take them off." They did, and with the petticoats rolled up under their arms, ran along the railway, skirting the newly fallen mound of stones and rock and earth, and bent, crushed, twisted trees. They ran at their best pace. Peter led, but the girls were not far behind. They reached the corner that hid the mound from the straight line of railway that ran half a mile without curve or corner. "Now," said Peter, taking hold of the largest flannel petticoat. "You're not," Phyllis faltered. "You're not going to tear them?" "Shut up," said Peter, with brief sternness. "Oh, yes," said Bobby. "Tear them into little bits if you like. Don't you see, Phil, if we can't stop the train, there'll be a real live accident with people killed. Oh, horrible. Here, Peter, you'll never tear it through the band." She took the red flannel petticoat from him and tore it off an inch from the band. Then she tore the other in the same way. "There," said Peter, tearing in his turn. He divided each petticoat into 3 pieces. "Now we've got 6 flags." He looked at the watch again. "And we've got 7 minutes. We must have flagstaffs." The knives given to boys are, for some odd reason, seldom of the kind of steel that keeps sharp. The young saplings had to be broken off. 2 came up by the roots. The leaves were stripped from them. "We must cut holes in the flags and run the sticks through the holes," said Peter. And the holes were cut. The knife was sharp enough to cut flannel with. 2 of the flags were set up in heaps of loose stones between the sleepers of the down line. Then Phyllis and Roberta took each a flag and stood ready to wave it as soon as the train came in sight. "I shall have the other 2 myself," said Peter, "because it was my idea to wave something." "Red." "There are petticoats, though," Phyllis was beginning, but Bobby interrupted. "Oh, what does it matter who waves what, if we can only save the train?" Perhaps Peter had not rightly calculated the number of minutes it would take the 11.29 to get from the station to the place where they were, or perhaps the train was late. Anyway, it seemed a very long time that they waited. Phyllis grew impatient. "I expect the watch is wrong, and the train's gone by," said she. Peter relaxed the heroic attitude he had chosen to show off his 2 flags, and Bobby began to feel sick with suspense. It seemed to her that they had been standing there for hours and hours, holding those silly little red flannel flags that no one would ever notice. The train wouldn't care. It would go rushing by them and tear around the corner and go crashing into that awful mound. And everyone would be killed. Her hands grew very cold and trembled so that she could hardly hold the flag. And then came the distant rumble and hum of the metals, and a puff of white steam showed far away along the stretch of line. "Stand firm," said Peter, "and wave like mad. When it gets to that big furze bush, step back, but go on waving. Don't stand on the line, Bobby." The train came rattling along very, very fast. "They don't see us. They won't see us." "It's all no good," cried Bobby. The 2 little flags on the line swayed as the nearing train shook and loosened the heaps of loose stones that held them up. One of them slowly leaned over and fell on the line. Bobby jumped forward and caught it up and waved it. Her hands did not tremble now. It seemed that the train came on as fast as ever. It was very near now. "Keep off the line, you silly cuckoo," said Peter fiercely. "It's no good," Bobby said again. "Stand back," cried Peter suddenly, and he dragged Phyllis back by the arm. But Bobby cried, "Not yet, not yet," and waved her 2 flags right over the line. The front of the engine looked black and enormous. Its voice was loud and harsh. "Oh, stop, stop," cried Bobby. No one heard her. At least Peter and Phyllis didn't, for the oncoming rush of the train covered the sound of her voice with a mountain of sound. But afterwards she used to wonder whether the engine itself had not heard her. It seemed almost as though it had, for it slackened swiftly, slackened and stopped, not 20 yards from the place where Bobby's 2 flags waved over the line. She saw the great black engine stop dead, but somehow she could not stop waving the flags. And when the driver and the fireman had got off the engine, and Peter and Phyllis had gone to meet them and pour out their excited tale of the awful mound, just round the corner, Bobby still waved the flags, but more and more feebly and jerkily. When the others turned towards her, she was lying across the line with her hands flung forward and still gripping the sticks of the little red flannel flags. The engine driver picked her up, carried her to the train, and laid her on the cushions of a first-class carriage. "Gone right off in a faint," he said. "Poor little woman. And no wonder. I'll just have a look at this air mound of yours, and then we'll run you back to the station and get her seen to." It was horrible to see Bobby lying so white and quiet, with her lips blue and parted. "I believe that's what people look like when they're dead," whispered Phyllis. "Don't," said Peter. Sharply they sat by Bobby on the blue cushions, and the train ran back. Before it reached their station, Bobby had sighed and opened her eyes, and rolled herself over and begun to cry. This cheered the others wonderfully. They had seen her cry before, but they had never seen her faint, nor anyone else, for the matter of that. They had not known what to do when she was fainting, but now she was only crying, they could thump her on the back and tell her not to, just as they always did. And presently, when she stopped crying, they were able to laugh at her for being such a coward as to faint. When the station was reached, the 3 were the heroes of an agitated meeting on the platform. The praises they got for their prompt action, their common sense, their ingenuity, were enough to have turned anybody's head. Phyllis enjoyed herself thoroughly. She had never been a real heroine before, and the feeling was delicious. Peter's ears got very red. Yet he, too, enjoyed himself. Only Bobby wished they all wouldn't. She wanted to get away. "You'll hear from the company about this, I expect," said the station master. Bobby wished she might never hear of it again. She pulled at Peter's jacket. "Oh, come away, come away. I want to go home," she said. So they went. And as they went, station master and porter and guards and driver and firemen and passengers sent up a cheer. "Oh, listen," cried Phyllis. "That's for use." "Yes," said Peter. "I say, I am glad I thought about something red and waving it." "How lucky we did put on our red flannel petticoats," said Phyllis. Bobby said nothing. She was thinking of the horrible mound, and the trustful train rushing towards it. "And it was you that saved them," said Peter. "How dreadful if they had all been killed," said Phyllis. "Wouldn't it, Bobby?" "We never got any cherries after all," said Bobby. The others thought her rather heartless. I hope you don't mind my telling you a good deal about Roberta. The fact is, I am growing very fond of her. The more I observe her, the more I love her. And I notice all sorts of things about her that I like. For instance, she was quite oddly anxious to make other people happy. And she could keep a secret, a tolerably rare accomplishment. Also, she had the power of silent sympathy. That sounds rather dull, I know, but it's not so dull as it sounds. It just means that a person is able to know that you are unhappy, and to love you extra on that account, without bothering you by telling you all the time how sorry she is for you. That was what Bobby was like. She knew that Mother was unhappy, and that Mother had not told her the reason. So she just loved Mother more, and never said a single word that could let Mother know how earnestly her little girl wondered what Mother was unhappy about. This needs practice. It is not so easy as you might think. Whatever happened, and all sorts of nice, pleasant, ordinary things happened, such as picnics, games, and buns for tea. Bobby always had these thoughts at the back of her mind. Mother's unhappy. Why? I don't know. She doesn't want me to know. I won't try to find out, but she is unhappy. Why? I don't know. She doesn't, and so on, repeating and repeating like a tune that you don't know the stopping. Part of Dot, the Russian gentleman, still took up a good deal of everybody's thoughts. All the editors and secretaries of societies and members of Parliament had answered Mother's letters as politely as they knew how. But none of them could tell where the wife and children of Mr. Sheskansky would be likely to be. Did I tell you that the Russian's very Russian name was that? Bobby had another quality, which you will hear differently described by different people. Some of them call it interfering in other people's business, and some call it helping lame dogs. Overstyles, and some call it loving kindness. It just means trying to help people. She racked her brains to think of some way of helping the Russian gentleman to find his wife and children. He had learned a few words of English now. He could say, "Good morning," and "Good night," and "Please," and "Thank you," and "Pretty," when the children brought him flowers, and "Ver good," when they asked him how he had slept. Dot, the way he smiled when he said his English, was, Bobby felt, just too sweet for anything. She used to think of his face, because she fancied it would help her to some way of helping him. But it did not. Yet his being there cheered her, because she saw that it made Mother happier. She likes to have someone to be good to, even beside us, said Bobby. And I know she hated to let him have Father's clothes. But I suppose it hurt nice, or she wouldn't have. For many and many a night after the day when she and Peter and Phyllis had saved the train from wreck by waving their little red flannel flags, Bobby used to wake screaming and shivering, seeing again that horrible mound and the poor, dear, trustful engine rushing on towards it, just thinking that it was doing its swift duty and that everything was clear and safe. And then a warm thrill of pleasure used to run through her at the remembrance of how she and Peter and Phyllis and the red flannel petticoats had really saved everybody. One morning a letter came. It was addressed to Peter and Bobby and Phyllis. They opened it with enthusiastic curiosity, for they did not often get letters. The letter said, "Dear Sir and Ladies, it is proposed to make a small presentation to you in commemoration of your prompt and courageous action in warning the train on the Inst, and thus averting what must, humanly speaking, have been a terrible accident. The presentation will take place at this station at 3 o'clock on the 30th Inst, if this time and place will be convenient to you. Yours faithfully, Jabez Inglewood, Secretary, Great Northern and Southern Railway Co." There never had been a prouder moment in the lives of the three children. They rushed to Mother with the letter, and she also felt proud and said so, and this made the children happier than ever. But if the presentation is money, you must say, "Thank you, but we'd rather not take it," said Mother. "I'll wash your Indian muslins at once," she added. "You must look tidy on an occasion like this." "Phil and I can wash them," said Bobby, "if you'll iron them, Mother. Washing is rather fun. I wonder whether you've ever done it." This particular washing took place in the back kitchen, which had a stone floor and a very big stone sink under its window. "Let's put the bath on the sink," said Phyllis. "Then we can pretend we're out-of-doors washerwomen like Mother saw in France." "But they were washing in the cold river," said Peter, his hands in his pockets, "not in hot water." "This is a hot river," Then, said Phyllis, lend a hand with the bath, there's a dear. I should like to see a deer lending a hand, said Peter, but he lent his. Now to rub and scrub and scrub and rub, said Phyllis, hopping joyously about as Bobby carefully carried the heavy kettle from the kitchen fire. Oh no, said Bobby, greatly shocked. You don't rub muslin. You put the boiled soap in the hot water and make it all frothy lathery, and then you shake the muslin and squeeze it ever so gently, and all the dirt comes out. It's only clumsy things like tablecloths and sheets that have to be rubbed. Ugh. Lilac and the Gloire de Dijon roses outside the window swayed in the soft breeze. It's a nice drying day, that's one thing, said Bobby, feeling very grown up. Oh, I do wonder what wonderful feelings we shall have when we wear the Indian muslin dresses. Yes, so do I, said Phyllis, shaking and squeezing the muslin in quite a professional manner. Now we squeeze out the soapy water. No, we mustn't twist them and then rinse them. I'll hold them while you and Peter empty the bath and get clean water. A presentation. That means presents, said Peter, as his sisters, having duly washed the pegs and wiped the line, hung up the dresses to dry. Whatever will it be? It might be anything, said Phyllis. What I've always wanted is a baby elephant butt. I suppose they wouldn't know that. Suppose it was gold models of steam engines, said Bobby. Or a big model of the scene of the prevented accident, suggested Peter, with a little model train and dolls dressed like us, and the engine driver and firemen and passengers. Do you like, said Bobby, doubtfully, drying her hands on the rough towel that hung on a roller at the back of the scullery door. Do you like us being rewarded for saving a train? Yes, I do, said Peter, downrightly. And don't you try to come it over us that you don't like it too, because I know you do. Yes, said Bobby, doubtfully, I know I do. But oughtn't we to be satisfied with just having done it, and not ask for anything more? Who did ask for anything more? Silly, said her brother. Victoria Cross soldiers don't ask for it, but they're glad enough to get it all the same. Perhaps it'll be medals. Then, when I'm very old indeed, I shall show them to my grandchildren and say, we only did our duty, and they'll be awfully proud of me. You have to be married, warned Phyllis, or you don't have any grandchildren. I suppose I shall have to be married some day, said Peter, but it will be an awful bother having her round all the time. I'd like to marry a lady who had trances, and only woke up once or twice a year, just to say you were the light of her life, and then go to sleep again. Yes, that wouldn't be bad, said Bobby. When I get married, said Phyllis, I shall want him to want me to be awake all the time, so that I can hear him say how nice I am. I think it would be nice, said Bobby, to marry someone very poor, and then you'd do all the work, and he'd love you most frightfully, and see the blue wood smoke curling up among the trees from the domestic hearth as he came home from work every night. I say we've got to answer that letter and say that the time and place WILL be convenient to us. There's the soap, Peter. We're both as clean as clean. That pink box of writing paper you had on your birthday, Phil. It took some time to arrange what should be said. Mother had gone back to her writing, and several sheets of pink paper with scalloped gilt edges and green four-leaved shamrocks in the corner were spoiled before the three had decided what to say. Then each made a copy and signed it with its own name. The threefold letter ran, Dear Mr. Jabez Inglewood, thank you very much. We did not want to be rewarded, but only to save the train. But we are glad you think so, and thank you very much. The time and place, you say, will be quite convenient to us. Thank you very much. Your affecate little friend. Then came the name, and after it, P.S. Thank you very much. Washing is much easier than ironing, said Bobby, taking the clean, dry dresses off the line. I do love to see things come clean. Oh, I don't know how we shall wait till it's time to know what presentation they're going to present. When at last, it seemed a very long time after it was the day, the three children went down to the station at the proper time. And everything that happened was so odd that it seemed like a dream. The station master came out to meet them, in his best clothes, as Peter noticed at once, and led them into the waiting room where once they had played the advertisement game. It looked quite different now. A carpet had been put down, and there were pots of roses on the mantelpiece, and on the window ledges green branches stuck up, like holly and laurel are at Christmas. Over the framed advertisement of Cook's Tours and the Beauties of Devon and the Paris Lions Railway. There were quite a number of people there, besides the porter 2 or 3 ladies in smart dresses, and quite a crowd of gentlemen in high hats and frock coats, besides everybody who belonged to the station. They recognized several people who had been in the train on the red flannel petticoat day. Best of all, their own old gentleman was there, and his coat and hat and collar seemed more than ever different from anyone else's. He shook hands with them, and then everybody sat down on chairs, and a gentleman in spectacles. They found out afterwards that he was the district superintendent. Began quite a long speech, very clever indeed. I am not going to write the speech down. First, because you would think it dull, and secondly, because it made all the children blush so and get so hot about the ears that I am quite anxious to get away from this part of the subject. And thirdly, because the gentleman took so many words to say what he had to say that I really haven't time to write them down. He said all sorts of nice things about the children's bravery and presence of mind, and when he had done, he sat down, and everyone who was there clapped and said, "Hear, hear." And then the old gentleman got up and said things too. It was very like a prize-giving. And then he called the children one by their names, and gave each of them a beautiful gold watch and chain. And inside the watches were engraved after the name of the watch's new owner, from the directors of the Northern and Southern Railway, in grateful recognition of the courageous and prompt action which averted an accident on 1905. The watches were the most beautiful you can possibly imagine, and each one had a blue leather case to live in when it was at home. You must make a speech now and thank everyone for their kindness, whispered the station master in Peter's ear, and pushed him forward. Begin, ladies and gentlemen, he added. Each of the children had already said, "Thank you," quite properly. "Oh dear," said Peter, but he did not resist the push. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said in a rather husky voice. Then there was a pause, and he heard his heart beating in his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he went on with a rush, "it's most awfully good of you, and we shall treasure the watches all our lives. But really, we don't deserve it, because what we did wasn't anything really. At least, I mean it was awfully exciting, and what I mean to say thank you all very, very much." The people clapped Peter more than they had done the district superintendent, and then everybody shook hands with them, and as soon as politeness would let them, they got away, and tore up the hill to Three Chimneys with their watches in their hands. It was a wonderful day, the kind of day that very seldom happens to anybody, and to most of us not at all. "I did want to talk to the old gentleman about something else," said Bobby, "but it was so public-like, being in church." "What did you want to say?" asked Phyllis. "I'll tell you when I've thought about it more," said Bobby Dot. So when she had thought a little more, she wrote a letter. "My dearest old gentleman," it said, "I want most awfully to ask you something. If you could get out of the train and go by the next, it would do. I do not want you to give me anything. Mother says we ought not to. And besides, we do not want any things. Only to talk to you about a prisoner and captive. Your loving little friend, Bobby." She got the station master to give the letter to the old gentleman, And next day she asked Peter and Phyllis to come down to the station with her at the time when the train that brought the old gentleman from town would be passing through. She explained her idea to them, and they approved thoroughly. They had all washed their hands and faces, and brushed their hair, and were looking as tidy as they knew how. But Phyllis, always unlucky, had upset a jug of lemonade down the front of her dress. There was no time to change, and the wind happening to blow from the coal yard, her frock was soon powdered with gray, which stuck to the sticky lemonade stains and made her look, as Peter said, like any little gutter child. It was decided that she should keep behind the others as much as possible. Perhaps the old gentleman won't notice, said Bobby. The aged are often weak in the eyes. There was no sign of weakness, however, in the eyes or in any other part of the old gentleman as he stepped from the train and looked up and down the platform. The three children, now that it came to the point, suddenly felt that rush of deep shyness which makes your ears red and hot, your hands warm and wet, and the tip of your nose pink and shiny. "Oh," said Phyllis, "my heart's thumping like a steam engine right under my sash, too." "Nonsense," said Peter. "People's hearts aren't under their sashes." "I don't care, mine is," said Phyllis. "If you're going to talk like a poetry book," said Peter, "my heart's in my mouth." "My heart's in my boots, if you come to that," said Roberta. "But do come on. He'll think we're idiots." "He won't be far wrong," said Peter, gloomily. And they went forward to meet the old gentleman. "Hello," he said, shaking hands with them all in turn. "This is a very great pleasure." "It was good of you to get out," Bobby said, perspiring and polite. He took her arm and drew her into the waiting room, where she and the others had played the advertisement game the day they found the Russian. Phyllis and Peter followed. "Well," said the old gentleman, giving Bobby's arm a kind little shake before he let it go. "Well, what is it?" "Oh, please," said Bobby. "Yes," said the old gentleman. "What I mean to say," said Bobby. "Well," said the old gentleman. "It's all very nice and kind," said she. "But," he said, "I wish I might say something," she said. "Say it?" "Well then," said Bobby, and out came the story of the Russian who had written. Beautiful book about poor people, and had been sent to prison and to Siberia for just that. And what we want more than anything in the world is to find his wife and children for him, said Bobby. But we don't know how. But you must be most horribly clever, or you wouldn't be a direction of the railway. And if you knew how and would, we'd rather have that than anything else in the world. We'd go without the watches, even if you could sell them and find his wife with the money. And the others said so too, though not with so much enthusiasm. Said the old gentleman, pulling down the white waistcoat that had the big gilt buttons on it. What did you say the name was? Frying Pansky? No, said Bobby earnestly. I'll write it down for you. It doesn't really look at all like that, except when you say it. Have you a bit of pencil in the back of an envelope? She asked. The old gentleman got out a gold pencil case and a beautiful, sweet-smelling, green Russian leather notebook and opened it at a new page. Here, he said, right here. Thank you for the roses so many times, much more than he need if he pulled out the line and gave it to Peter. It wasn't exchange. It was the grateful heart. Oh, I beg your pardon, Peter, said Bobby. I am so sorry. Don't mention it, said Peter grandly. I knew you would be. So then they all went up to the canal bridge. The idea was to fish from the bridge, but the line was not quite long enough. Never mind, said Bobby. Let's just stay here and look at things. Everything's so beautiful. It was. The sun was setting in red splendor over the gray and purple hills, and the canal lay smooth and shiny in the shadow. No ripple broke its surface. It was like a gray satin ribbon between the dusky green silk of the meadows that were on each side of its banks. "It's all right," said Peter. "But somehow I can always see how pretty things are much better when I've something to do. Let's get down onto the towpath and fish from there." Phyllis and Bobby remembered how the boys on the canal boats had thrown coal at them, and they said so. "Oh, nonsense," said Peter. "There aren't any boys here now. If there were, I'd fight them." Peter's sisters were kind enough not to remind him how he had not fought the boys when coal had last been thrown. Instead, they said, "All right then," and cautiously climbed down the steep bank to the towing path. The line was carefully baited, and for half an hour they fished patiently and in vain. Not a single nibble came to nourish hope in their hearts. All eyes were intent on the sluggish waters that earnestly pretended they had never harbored a single minnow when a loud, rough shout made them start. "Hi," said the shout, in most disagreeable tones. "Get out of that, can't you?" An old white horse coming along the towing path was within half a dozen yards of them. They sprang to their feet and hastily climbed up the bank. "We'll slip down again when they've gone by," said Bobby Dot, but alas, the barge, after the manner of barges, stopped under the bridge. "She's going to anchor," said Peter. "Just our luck." The barge did not anchor, because an anchor is not part of a canal boat's furniture, but she was moored with ropes fore and aft, and the ropes were made fast to the palings and to crowbars driven into the ground. "What you staring at?" growled the bargee, crossly. "We weren't staring," said Bobby. "We wouldn't be so rude." "Rude be blessed," said the man. "Get along with you." "Get along yourself," said Peter. He remembered what he had said about fighting boys. And besides, he felt safe halfway up the bank. "We've as much right here as anyone else." "Oh, have you indeed?" said the man. "We'll soon see about that." And he came across his deck and began to climb down the side of his barge. "Oh, come away, Peter, come away," said Bobby and Phyllis in agonized unison. "Not me," said Peter, "but you'd better." The girls climbed to the top of the bank and stood ready to bolt for home as soon as they saw their brother out of danger. The way home lay all downhill. They knew that they all ran well. The bargee did not look as if he did. He was red-faced, heavy, and beefy, but as soon as his foot was on the towing path, the children saw that they had misjudged him. He made one spring up the bank and caught Peter by the leg, dragged him down, set him on his feet with a shake, took him by the ear, and said sternly, "Now then, what do you mean by it? Don't you know these air waters is preserved? You ain't no right catching fish, not to say nothing of your precious cheek." Peter was always proud afterwards, when he remembered that, with the bargee's furious fingers tightening on his ear, the bargee's crimson countenance close to his own, the bargee's hot breath on his neck, he had the courage to speak the truth. "I wasn't catching fish," said Peter. "That's not your fault, I'll be bound," said the man, giving Peter's ear a twist, not a hard one, but still a twist. Peter could not say that it was. Bobby and Phyllis had been holding on to the railings above and skipping with anxiety. Now suddenly, Bobby slipped through the railings and rushed down the bank towards Peter, so impetuously that Phyllis, following more temperately, felt certain that her sister's descent would end in the waters of the canal. And so it would have done if the bargee hadn't let go of Peter's ear and caught her in his jerseyed arm. "Who are you a-shoving of?" he said, setting her on her feet. "Oh," said Bobby, breathless, "I'm not shoving anybody. At least, not on purpose. Please don't be cross with Peter. Of course, if it's your canal, we're sorry, and we won't any more. But we didn't know it was yours." "Go along with you," said the bargee. "Yes, we will." "Indeed we will," said Bobby, earnestly. "But we do beg your pardon, and really we haven't caught a single fish. I'd tell you directly if we had. Honor bright, I would." She held out her hands, and Phyllis turned out her little empty pocket to show that really they hadn't any fish concealed about them. "Well," said the bargee, more gently, "cut along then, and don't you do it again, that's all." The children hurried up the bank. "Chuck us a coat, Maria," shouted the man. And a red-haired woman in a green plaid shawl came out from the cabin door with a baby in her arms and threw a coat to him. He put it on, climbed the bank, and slouched along across the bridge towards the village. "You'll find me up at the Rose and Crown when you've got the kid to sleep," he called to her from the bridge. When he was out of sight, the children slowly returned. Peter insisted on this. "The canal may belong to him," he said, "though I don't believe it does. But the bridge is everybody's. Dr. Forrest told me it's public property. I'm not going to be bounced off the bridge by him or anyone else, so I tell you." Peter's ear was still sore, and so were his feelings. The girls followed him as gallant soldiers might follow the leader of a forlorn hope. "I do wish you wouldn't," was all they said. "Go home if you're afraid," said Peter. "Leave me alone. I'm not afraid." The sound of the man's footsteps died away along the quiet road. The peace of the evening was not broken by the notes of the sedge warblers, or by the voice of the woman in the barge, singing her baby to sleep. It was a sad song she sang, something about Bill Bailey and how she wanted him to come home. The children stood leaning their arms on the parapet of the bridge. They were glad to be quiet for a few minutes, because all three hearts were beating much more quickly. "I'm not going to be driven away by any old bargeman." "I'm not," said Peter thickly. "Of course not," Phyllis said soothingly. "You didn't give in to him, so now we might go home, don't you think?" "No," said Peter. Nothing more was said till the woman got off the barge, climbed the bank, and came across the bridge. She hesitated, looking at the three backs of the children. Then she said, "Ahem." Peter stayed as he was, but the girls looked round. "You mustn't take no notice of my Bill," said the woman. "His bark's worsen, his bite. Some of the kids down Farley way is fair terrors. It was them put his back up calling out about who ate the puppy pie under Marlow Bridge." "Who did?" asked Phyllis. "I dunno," said the woman. "Nobody don't know. But somehow, and I don't know the why nor the wherefore of it, them words is pizen to a barge master. Don't you take no notice. He won't be back for 2 hours good. You might catch a power o' fish afore that. The light's good and all," she added. "Thank you," said Bobby. "You're very kind. Where's your baby?" "Asleep in the cabin," said the woman. "He's all right. Never wakes afore 12. Reg'lar as a church clock, he is." "I'm sorry," said Bobby. "I would have liked to see him, close to. And a finer you never did see, miss, though I says it." The woman's face brightened as she spoke. "Aren't you afraid to leave it?" sighed Peter. "Lor love you, no," said the woman. "Who'd hurt a little thing like him? Besides, Spot's there." "So long." The woman went away. "Shall we go home?" sighed Phyllis. "You can." "I'm going to fish," said Peter briefly. "I thought we came up here to talk about Perks's birthday," said Phyllis. "Perks's birthday'll keep." So they got down on the towing path again, and Peter fished. He did not catch anything, got it. It was almost quite dark. The girls were getting tired, and as Bobby said, it was past bedtime, when suddenly Phyllis cried, "What's that?" And she pointed to the canal boat. Smoke was coming from the chimney of the cabin, had indeed been curling softly into the soft evening air all the time. But now other wreaths of smoke were rising, and these were from the cabin door. "Asterisk, it's on fire, that's all," said Peter, calmly. "Serve him right." "Oh, how can you?" cried Phyllis. "Think of the poor dear dog, the baby," screamed Bobby Dot in an instant. All three made for the barge, but her mooring ropes were slack, and the little breeze, hardly strong enough to be felt, had yet been strong enough to drift her stern against the bank. Bobby was first, then came Peter, and it was Peter who slipped and fell. He went into the canal up to his neck, and his feet could not feel the bottom, but his arm was on the edge of the barge. Phyllis caught at his hair. It hurt, but it helped him to get out. Next minute he had leaped onto the barge, Phyllis following. "Not you," he shouted to Bobby. "Me, because I'm wet." He caught up with Bobby at the cabin door and flung her aside very roughly indeed. If they had been playing such roughness would have made Bobby weep with tears of rage and pain. Now, though he flung her onto the edge of the hold, so that her knee and her elbow were grazed and bruised, she only cried, "No, not you, me," and struggled up again. But not quickly enough. She wrote down Shezkansky and said, "That's how you write it. You call it Shapansky." The old gentleman took out a pair of gold-rimmed spectacles and fitted them on his nose. When he had read the name, he looked quite different. "That man, bless my soul," he said. "Why, I've read his book. It's translated into every European language. A fine book, a noble book. And so your mother took him in like the Good Samaritan. Well, well, I'll tell you what, youngsters, your mother must be a very good woman." "Of course she is," said Phyllis, in astonishment. "And you're a very good man," said Bobby, very shy, but firmly resolved to be polite. "You flatter me," said the old gentleman, taking off his hat with a flourish. "And now am I to tell you what I think of you?" "Oh, please don't," said Bobby, hastily. "Why?" asked the old gentleman. "I don't exactly know," said Bobby. "Only if it's horrid, I don't want you to. And if it's nice, I'd rather you didn't." The old gentleman laughed. "Well, then," he said, "I'll only just say that I'm very glad you came to me about this, very glad indeed. And I shouldn't be surprised if I found out something very soon. I know a great many Russians in London, and every Russian knows H.I.'s name. Now tell me all about yourselves." He turned to the others, but there was only one other, and that was Peter. Phyllis had disappeared. "Tell me all about yourself," said the old gentleman again. And quite naturally, Peter was stricken dumb. "All right, we'll have an examination," said the old gentleman. "You two sit on the table, and I'll sit on the bench and ask questions." He did, and out came their names and ages, their father's name and business, how long they had lived at 3 Chimneys, and a great deal more. The questions were beginning to turn on a herring, and a half for 3 halfpence, and a pound of lead, and a pound of feathers, when the door of the waiting room was kicked open by a boot. As the boot entered, everyone could see that its lace was coming undone, and in came Phyllis, very slowly and carefully. In one hand she carried a large tin can, and in the other a thick slice of bread and butter. "Afternoon tea," she announced proudly, and held the can and the bread and butter out to the old gentleman, who took them and said, "Bless my soul." "Yes," said Phyllis. "It's very thoughtful of you," said the old gentleman, "very. But you might have got a cup," said Bobby, "and a plate." "Perks always drinks out of the can," said Phyllis, flushing red. "I think it was very nice of him to give it me at all, let alone cups and plates," she added. "So do I," said the old gentleman, and he drank some of the tea and tasted the bread and butter. And then it was time for the next train, and he got into it with many goodbyes and kind last words. "Well," said Peter, when they were left on the platform, and the tail lights of the train disappeared round the corner, "it's my belief that we've lighted a candle today like Latimer, you know, when he was being burned, and there'll be fireworks for our Russian before long." And so there were. It wasn't 10 days after the interview in the waiting room that the 3 children were sitting on the top of the biggest rock in the field, below their house, watching the 5.15 steam way from the station, along the bottom of the valley. They saw, too, the few people who had got out at the station straggling up the road towards the village, and they saw one person leave the road and open the gate that led across the fields to Three Chimneys and to nowhere else. Who on earth? Said Peter, scrambling down. Let's go and see, said Phyllis. So they did. And when they got near enough to see who the person was, they saw it was their old gentleman himself, his brass buttons winking in the afternoon sunshine, and his white waistcoat looking whiter than ever against the green of the field. "Hello," shouted the children, waving their hands. "Hello," shouted the old gentleman, waving his hat. Then the three started to run, and when they got to him, they hardly had breath left to say, "How do you do?" "Good news," said he. "I've found your Russian friend's wife and child, and—" I couldn't resist the temptation of giving myself the pleasure of telling him. But as he looked at Bobby's face, he felt that he could resist that temptation. "Here," he said to her, "you run on and tell him. The other two will show me the way." Bobby ran. But when she had breathlessly panted out the news to the Russian and Mother, sitting in the quiet garden, when Mother's face had lighted up so beautifully, and she had said half a dozen quick French words to the exile, Bobby wished that she had not carried the news. For the Russian sprang up with a cry that made Bobby's heart leap, and then tremble, a cry of love and longing such as she had never heard. Then he took Mother's hand and kissed it gently and reverently, and then he sank down in his chair and covered his face with his hands and sobbed. Bobby crept away. She did not want to see the others just then, but she was as gay as anybody when the endless French talking was over. When Peter had torn down to the village for buns and cakes, and the girls had got tea ready and taken it out into the garden, the old gentleman was most merry and delightful. He seemed to be able to talk in French and English almost at the same moment, and Mother did nearly as well. It was a delightful time. Mother seemed as if she could not make enough fuss about the old gentleman, and she said yes at once when he asked if he might present some goodies to his little friends. The word was new to the children, but they guessed that it meant sweets. For the three large pink and green boxes, tied with green ribbon, which he took out of his bag, held unheard of layers of beautiful chocolates. The Russian's few belongings were packed, and they all saw him off at the station. Then Mother turned to the old gentleman and said, "I don't know how to thank you for everything. It has been a real pleasure to me to see you. But we live very quietly. I am so sorry that I can't ask you to come and see us again." The children thought this very hard. When they had made a friend, and such a friend, they would dearly have liked him to come and see them again. What the old gentleman thought they couldn't tell. He only said, "I consider myself very fortunate, madam, to have been received once at your house." "Ah," said Mother, "I know I must seem surly and ungrateful. You could never seem anything but a most charming and gracious lady," said the old gentleman with another of his bows. And as they turned to go up the hill, Bobby saw her mother's face. "How tired you look, Mammy," she said. "Lean on me." "It's my place to give Mother my arm," said Peter. "I'm the head man of the family when Father's away." Mother took an arm of each. "How awfully nice," said Phyllis, skipping joyfully. "To think of the dear Russian embracing his long-lost wife. The baby must have grown a lot since he saw it." "Yes," said Mother. "I wonder whether Father will think I've grown." Phyllis went on, skipping still more gaily. "I have grown already, haven't I, Mother?" "Yes," said Mother. "Oh, yes." And Bobby and Peter felt her hands tighten on their arms. "Poor old Mammy, you are tired," said Peter. Bobby said, "Come on, Phil. I'll race you to the gate." And she started the race, though she hated doing it. You know why Bobby did that. Mother only thought that Bobby was tired of walking slowly. Even mothers, who love you better than anyone else ever will, don't always understand. Asterisk, that's a likely little brooch you've got on, miss, said Perks the porter. I don't know as ever I see a thing more like a buttercup without it." "Was a buttercup?" "Yes," said Bobby, glad and flushed by this approval. "I always thought it was more like a buttercup almost than even a real one, and I never thought it would come to be mine, my very own, and then Mother gave it to me for my birthday." "Oh, have you had a birthday?" said Perks. And he seemed quite surprised, as though a birthday were a thing only granted to a favored few. "Yes," said Bobby. "When's your birthday, Mr. Perks?" The children were taking tea with Mr. Perks in the porter's room among the lamps and the railway almanacs. They had brought their own cups and some jam turnovers. Mr. Perks made tea in a beer can, as usual, and everyone felt very happy and confidential. "My birthday?" said Perks, tipping some more dark brown tea out of the can into Peter's cup. "I give up keeping of my birthday afore you was born." "But you must have been born sometime, you know," said Phyllis thoughtfully, "even if it was 20 years ago, or 30 or 60 or 70. "Not so long as that, Missy," Perks grinned as he answered. "If you really want to know, it was 32 years ago, come the 15th of this month. Then why don't you keep it?" asked Phyllis. "I've got something else to keep besides birthdays," said Perks briefly. "Oh, what?" asked Phyllis eagerly. "Not secrets?" "No," said Perks. "The kids and the missus." It was this talk that set the children thinking, and presently talking. Perks was, on the whole, the dearest friend they had made. Not so grand as the station master, but more approachable, less powerful than the old gentleman, but more confidential. "It seems horrid that nobody keeps his birthday," said Bobby. "Couldn't we do something?" "Let's go up to the canal bridge and talk it over," said Peter. "I got a new gut line from the postman this morning. He gave it me for a bunch of roses that I gave him for his sweetheart. She's ill." "Then I do think you might have given her the roses for nothing," said Bobby indignantly. Nying," said Peter disagreeably, and put his hands in his pockets. "He did, of course," said Phyllis in haste. "Directly we heard she was ill, we got the roses ready and waited by the gate. It was when you were making the breaker toast, and when he'd said—" "Yes," said Phyllis, "it's the same thing, isn't it? And we thought we'd make a nice birthday for him. He's been so awfully jolly decent to us, you know, Mother," said Peter, "and we agreed that next Monday we'd ask you, if we could." "But suppose there hadn't been a Monday before the 15th, said Mother. "Oh, then, we meant to ask you to let us anticipate it, and go without when the Monday came." "Anticipate," said Mother. "I see, certainly. It would be nice to put his name on the buns with pink sugar, wouldn't it?" "Perks," said Peter. "It's not a pretty name." "His other name's Albert," said Phyllis. "I asked him once." "We might put a P," said Mother. "I'll show you how when the day comes." This was all very well as far as it went. But even 14 halfpenny buns with a P on them in pink sugar do not of themselves make a very grand celebration. "There are always flowers?" "Of course," said Bobby later, when a really earnest council was being held on the subject in the hayloft where the broken chaff-cutting machine was, and the row of holes to drop hay through into the hay racks over the mangers of the stables below. "He's got lots of flowers of his own," said Peter. "But it's always nice to have them given you," said Bobby. "However many you've got of your own. We can use flowers for trimmings to the birthday, but there must be something to trim besides buns." "Let's all be quiet and think," said Phyllis. "No one's to speak until it's thought of something." So they were all quiet, and so very still that a brown rat thought that there was no one in the loft, and came out very boldly. When Bobby sneezed, the rat was quite shocked and hurried away, for he saw that a hayloft where such things could happen was no place for a respectable middle-aged rat that liked a quiet life. "Hooray!" cried Peter suddenly. "I've got it." He jumped up and kicked at the loose hay. "What?" said the others eagerly. Why, Perks is so nice to everybody. There must be lots of people in the village who'd like to help to make him a birthday. Let's go round and ask everybody. Mother said we weren't to ask people for things, said Bobby, doubtfully. For ourselves. She meant silly, not for other people. I'll ask the old gentleman too. You see if I don't, said Peter. Let's ask Mother first, said Bobby. Oh, what's the use of bothering Mother about every little thing, said Peter, especially when she's busy. Come on, let's go down to the village now and begin. So they went. The old lady at the post office said she didn't see why Perk should have a birthday any more than anyone else. No, said Bobby. I should like everyone to have one. Only we know when his is. Mine's tomorrow, said the old lady, and much notice anyone will take of it. Go along with you. So they went, and some people were kind, and some were crusty. And some would give, and some would not. It is rather difficult work asking for things, even for other people, as you have no doubt found if you have ever tried it. When the children got home and counted up what had been given and what had been promised, they felt that for the first day, it was not so bad. Peter wrote down the lists of the things in the little pocketbook where he kept the numbers of his engines. These were the lists. Given: a tobacco pipe from the sweet shop, half a pound of tea from the grocer's, a woolen scarf slightly faded from the draper's, which was the other side of the grocer's, a stuffed squirrel from the doctor, promised, a piece of meat from the butcher, 6 fresh eggs from the woman who lived in the old turnpike cottage, a piece of honeycomb and 6 bootlaces from the cobbler, and an iron shovel from the blacksmith's. Very early next morning, Bobby got up and woke Phyllis. This had been agreed on between them. They had not told Peter because they thought he would think it silly. But they told him afterwards when it had turned out all right. They cut a big bunch of roses and put it in a basket with the needlebook that Phyllis had made for Bobby on her birthday, and a very pretty blue necktie of Phyllis's. Then they wrote on a paper, "For Mrs. Ransom, with our best love, because it is her birthday." And they put the paper in the basket, and they took it to the post office, and went in and put it on the counter, and ran away before the old woman at the post office had time to get into her shop. Peter had grown confidential over helping Mother to get the breakfast, and had told her their plans. "There's no harm in it," said Mother, "but it depends how you do it. I only hope he won't be offended and think it's charity. Poor people are very proud, you know." "It isn't because he's poor," said Phyllis. "It's because we're fond of him." "I'll find some things that Phyllis has outgrown," said Mother, "if you're quite sure you can give them to him without his being offended. I should like to do some little thing for him, because he's been so kind to you. I can't do much because we're poor ourselves. What are you writing?" "Bobby?" "Nothing particular," said Bobby, who had suddenly begun to scribble. "I'm sure he'd like the things, Mother." The morning of the 15th was spent very happily in getting the buns and watching Mother make a pea on them with pink sugar. You know how it's done, of course. You beat up whites of eggs and mix powdered sugar with them, and put in a few drops of cochineal. And then you make a cone of clean, white paper with a little hole at the pointed end, and put the pink egg sugar in at the big end. It runs slowly out at the pointed end, and you write the letters with it just as though it were a great fat pen full of pink sugar-ink dot. The buns looked beautiful with a pea on every one, and when they were put in a cool oven to set the sugar, the children went up to the village to collect the honey and the shovel and the other promised things. The old lady at the post office was standing on her doorstep. The children said, "Good morning," politely, as they passed. "Here, stop a bit," she said. So they stopped. "Those roses," said she. "Did you like them?" said Phyllis. "They were as fresh. I made the needlebook, but it was Bobby's present." She skipped joyously as she spoke. "Here's your basket," said the post office woman. She went in and brought out the basket. It was full of fat, red gooseberries. "I dare say Perks's children would like them," said she. "You are an old dear," said Phyllis, throwing her arms around the old lady's fat waist. "Perks will be pleased." "He won't be half so pleased. As I was with your needlebook, and the tie, and the pretty flowers and all," said the old lady, patting Phyllis's shoulder. "You're good little souls that you are. Look here, I've got a prom round the back in the wood lodge. It was got for my Emmy's first. That didn't live but 6 months, and she never had but that one. I'd like Mrs. Perks to have it. It 'ud be a help to her with that great boy of hers. Will you take it along?" "Oh," said all the children together, when Mrs. Ransom had got out the perambulator and taken off the careful papers that covered it, and dusted it all over. She said, "Well, there it is. I don't know but what I'd have given it to her before, if I'd thought of it. Only I didn't quite know if she'd accept of it from me. You tell her it was my Emmy's little one's prom. Oh, I sent it nice to think there is going to be a real live baby in it again." "Yes," said Mrs. Ransom, sighing and then laughing. "Here, I'll give you some peppermint cushions for the little ones, and then you run along before I give you the roof off my head and the clothes off my back." All the things that had been collected for Perks were packed into the perambulator, and at 3:30 Peter and Bobby and Phyllis wheeled it down to the little yellow house where Perks lived. The house was very tidy. On the window ledge was a jug of wild flowers, big daisies, and red sorrel, and feathery, flowery grasses dot. There was a sound of splashing from the wash-house, and a partly washed boy put his head round the door. "Mother's a-changing of herself," he said. "Down in a minute." A voice sounded down the narrow, freshly scrubbed stairs. The children waited. Next moment the stairs creaked, and Mrs. Perks came down, buttoning her bodice. Her hair was brushed very smooth and tight, and her face shone with soap and water. "I'm a bit late changing, miss," she said to Bobby, "owing to me having had a extra clean-up today, along o' Perks happening to name its being his birthday. I don't know what put it into his head to think of such a thing. We keeps the children's birthdays, of course, but him and me were too old for such like, as a general rule." "We knew it was his birthday," said Peter, "and we've got some presents for him outside in the perambulator." As the presents were being unpacked, Mrs. Perks gasped. When they were all unpacked, she surprised and horrified the children by sitting suddenly down on a wooden chair and bursting into tears. "Oh, don't," said everybody. "Oh, please don't." And Peter added, perhaps a little impatiently, "What on earth is the matter? You don't mean to say you don't like it?" Mrs. Perks only sobbed. The Perks children, now as shiny-faced as anyone could wish, stood at the wash-house door and scowled at the intruders. There was a silence, an awkward silence. "Don't you like it?" said Peter again, while his sisters patted Mrs. Perks on the back. She stopped crying as suddenly as she had begun. There, don't you mind me. I'm all right," she said. "Like it? Why, it's a birthday such as Perks never had, not even when he was a boy and stayed with his uncle, who was a corn chandler in his own account. He failed afterwards. Like it? Oh," and then she went on and said all sorts of things that I won't write down, because I am sure that Peter and Bobby and Phyllis would not like me too. Their ears got hotter and hotter, and their faces redder and redder at the kind things Mrs. Perks said. They felt they had done nothing to deserve all this praise. At last, Peter said, "Look here, we're glad you're pleased, but if you go on saying things like that, we must go home." And we did want to stay and see if Mr. Perks is pleased too, but we can't stand this. "I won't say another single word," said Mrs. Perks, with a beaming face, "but that needn't stop me thinking, need it? For if ever, can we have a plate for the buns?" Bobby asked abruptly. And then Mrs. Perks hastily laid the table for tea, and the buns and the honey and the gooseberries were displayed on plates, and the roses were put in 2 glass jam jars, and the tea table looked, as Mrs. Perks said, fit for a prince. To think, she said, me getting the place tidy early, and the little uns getting the wildflowers, and all when never did I think there'd be anything more for him, except the ounce of his pet particular that I got Saturday, and been saving up for him ever since. Bless us, he is early. Perks had indeed unlatched the latch of the little front gate. Oh, whispered Bobby, let's hide in the back kitchen, and you tell him about it. But give him the tobacco first, because you got it for him. And when you've told him, we'll all come in and shout, many happy returns. It was a very nice plan, but it did not quite come off. To begin with, there was only just time for Peter and Bobby and Phyllis to rush into the washhouse, pushing the young and open-mouthed Perks children in front of them. There was not time to shut the door, so that, without at all meaning it, they had to listen to what went on in the kitchen. The washhouse was a tight fit for the Perks children and the 3 Chimneys children, as well as all the washhouse's proper furniture, including the mangle and the copper. Hello, old woman. They heard Mr. Perks's voice say, here's a pretty set out. It's your birthday tea, Bert, said Mrs. Perks, and here's an ounce of your extra particular. I got it Saturday along. All you're happening to remember was your birthday today? Good old girl, said Mr. Perks, and there was a sound of a kiss. But what's that prom doing here? And what's all these bundles? And where did you get the sweet stuff? And the children did not hear what Mrs. Perks replied, because just then Bobby gave a start, put her hand in her pocket, and all her body grew stiff with horror. Oh, she whispered to the others, whatever shall we do? I forgot to put the labels on any of the things. He won't know it's from who. He'll think it's all U.S., and that we're trying to be grand or charitable, or something horrid. Hush, said Peter Dot, and then they heard the voice of Mr. Perks, loud and rather angry. I don't care, he said. I won't stand it, and so I tell you straight. But, said Mrs. Perks, it's them children you make such a fuss about, the children from the 3 Chimneys. I don't care, said Perks firmly. Not if it was an angel from heaven. We've got on all right all these years and no favors asked. I'm not going to begin these sort of charity goings-on at my time of life, so don't you think it? Nell. Oh, hush, said poor Mrs. Perks. Bert, shut your silly tongue, for goodness sake. The all 3 of M's in the washhouse are listening to every word you speaks. Then I'll give them something to listen to, said the angry Perks. I've spoke my mind to them afore now, and I'll do it again, he added, and he took 2 strides to the washhouse door, and flung it wide open, as wide, that is, as it would go, with the tightly packed children behind it. Come out, said Perks. Come out and tell me what you mean by it. Have I ever complained to you of being short, as you comes this charity lay over me? Oh, said Phyllis. I thought you'd be so pleased. I'll never try to be kind to anyone else as long as I live. No, I won't. Not never. She burst into tears. We didn't mean any harm, said Peter. It ain't what you mean so much as what you does, said Perks. Oh, don't, cried Bobby, trying hard to be braver than Phyllis, and to find more words than Peter had. Done for explaining in. We thought you'd love it. We always have things on our birthdays. Oh, yes, said Perks. Your own relations. That's different. Oh, no, Bobby answered. Not our own relations. All the servants always gave us things at home, and us to them when it was their birthdays. And when it was mine, and Mother gave me the brooch like a buttercup, Mrs. Viney gave me 2 lovely glass pots, and nobody thought she was coming the charity lay over us. If it had been glass pots here, said Perks, I wouldn't ha said so much. It's there being all this heaps and heaps of things I can't stand. No, nor won't, neither. But they're not all from us, said Peter. Only, we forgot to put the labels on. They're from all sorts of people in the village. Who put 'em up to it, I'd like to know. Asked Perks. Why, we did, sniffed Phyllis. Perks sat down heavily in the elbow chair and looked at them, with what Bobby afterwards described as withering glances of gloomy despair. So you've been round telling the neighbors we can't make both ends meet. Well, now you've disgraced us as deep as you can in the neighborhood. You can just take the whole bag of tricks back where it come from. Very much obliged, I'm sure. I don't doubt but what you meant it kind, but I'd rather not be acquainted with you any longer if it's all the same to you. He deliberately turned the chair round so that his back was turned to the children. The legs of the chair grated on the brick floor, and that was the only sound that broke the silence. Then suddenly Bobby spoke. Look here, she said. This is most awful. That's what I says, said Perks, not turning round. Look. Here, said Bobby, desperately. We'll go if you like, and you needn't be friends with us any more, if you don't want. But we shall always be friends with you, however nasty you are to us, sniffed Phyllis, wildly. Be quiet, said Peter, in a fierce aside. But before we go, Bobby went on desperately, do let us show you the labels we wrote to put on the things. I don't want to see no labels, said Perks, except proper luggage ones in my own walk of life. Do. You think I've kept respectable and outer debt on what I gets, and are having to take in washing to be give away for a laughing stock to all the neighbors? Laughing? Said Peter. You don't know. You're a very hasty gentleman, whined Phyllis. You know you were wrong once before, about us not telling you the secret about the Russian. Do let Bobby tell you about the labels. Well, go ahead, said Perks, grudgingly. Well then, said Bobby, fumbling miserably, yet not without hope, in her tightly stuffed pocket. We wrote down all the things everybody said when they gave us the things with the people's names, because Mother said we ought to be careful, but I wrote down what she said, and you'll see. But Bobby could not read the labels just at once. She had to swallow once or twice before she could begin. Mrs. Perks had been crying steadily ever since her husband had opened the wash-house door. Now she caught her breath, choked, and said, Don't you upset yourself, Missy. I know you meant it kind if he doesn't. May I read the labels? Said Bobby, crying on to the slips as she tried to sort them. Mother's first. It says, Little clothes for Mrs. Perks's children. Mother said, I'll find some of Phyllis's things that she's grown out of, if you're quite sure Mr. Perks wouldn't be offended and think it's meant for charity. I'd like to do some little thing for him, because he's so kind to you. I can't do much because we're poor ourselves. Bobby paused. That's all right, said Perks. Your ma's a born lady. We'll keep the little frocks and what not, Nell. Then there's the perambulator and the gooseberries. And the sweets, said Bobby. They're from Mrs. Ransom. She said, I dare say Mr. Perks's children would like the sweets. And the perambulator was got from my Emmy's first. It didn't live but 6 months, and she's never had but that one. I'd like Mrs. Perks to have it. It would be a help with her fine boy. I'd have given it before, if I'd been sure she'd accept of it from me. She told me to tell you, Bobby added, that it was her Emmy's little one's prom. I can't send that prom back, Bert, said Mrs. Perks firmly, and I won't. So don't you ask me. I'm not asking anything, said Perks gruffly. Then the shovel, said Bobby. Mr. James made it for you himself. And he said, where is it? Oh, yes, here. He said, you tell Mr. Perks it's a pleasure to make a little trifle for a man as is so much respected. And then he said he wished he could shoe your children and his own children, like they do the horses, because, well, he knew what shoe leather was. James is a good enough chap, said Perks. Then the honey, said Bobby in haste, and the bootlaces. He said he respected a man that paid his way, and the butcher said the same. And the old turnpike woman said many was the time you'd lent her a hand with her garden when you were a lad, and things like that came home to roost. I don't know what she meant. And everybody who gave anything said they liked you, and it was a very good idea of ours. And nobody said anything about charity or anything horrid like that. And the old gentleman gave Peter a gold pound for you, and said you were a man, knew your work. And I thought you'd love to know how fond people are of you, and I never was so unhappy in my life. Goodbye. I hope you'll forgive us some day. She could say no more, and she turned to go. Stop, said Perks, still, with his back to them. I take back every word I've said contrary to what you'd wish. Nell sat on the kettle. We'll take the things away if you're unhappy about them, said Peter. But I think everybody'll be most awfully disappointed, as well as us. I'm not unhappy about them, said Perks. I don't know, he added suddenly, wheeling the chair round and showing a very odd-looking screwed-up face. I don't know as ever I was better pleased. Not so much with the presents, though they're in a one collection, but the kind respect of our neighbors. That's worth having, eh, Nell? I think it's all worth having, said Mrs. Perks. And you've made a most ridiculous fuss about nothing, Bert, if you ask me. No, I ain't, said Perks firmly. If a man didn't respect himself, no one wouldn't do it for him. But everyone respects you, said Bobby. They all said so. I knew you'd like it when you really understood, said Phyllis, brightly. Humph, you'll stay to tea? Said Mr. Perks. Later on Peter proposed Mr. Perks's health, and Mr. Perks proposed a toast, also honored in tea, and the toast was, May the garland of friendship be ever green, which was much more poetical than anyone had expected from him. Asterisk, jolly good little kids, those, said Mr. Perks to his wife as they went to bed. Oh, they're all right, bless their hearts, said his wife. It's you that's the aggravatingest old thing that ever was. I was ashamed of you, I tell you. You didn't need to be, old gal. I climbed down handsome soon as I understood it wasn't charity. But charity's what I never did. Abide, and won't neither. Asterisk, all sorts of people were made happy by that birthday party. Mr. Perks and Mrs. Perks and the little Perkses by all the nice things and by the kind thoughts of their neighbors. The Three Chimneys children by the success, undoubted, though unexpectedly delayed, of their plan. And Mrs. Ransom, every time she saw the fat Perks baby in the perambulator, Mrs. Perks made quite a round of visits to thank people for their kind birthday presents, and after each visit felt that she had a better friend than she had thought. Yes, said Perks reflectively. It's not so much what you does as what you means. That's what I say. Now if it had been charity. Oh, drat charity, said Mrs. Perks. Nobody won't offer you charity, Bert, however much you was to want it, I lay. That was just friendliness, that was. When the clergyman called on Mrs. Perks, she told him all about it. It was friendliness, wasn't it, sir? Said she. I think, said the clergyman, it was what is sometimes called loving kindness. So you see, it was all right in the end. But if one does that sort of thing, one has to be careful to do it in the right way. For, as Mr. Perks said, when he had time to think it over, it's not so much what you do as what you mean. Asterisk, when they first went to live at Three Chimneys, the children had talked a great deal about their father, and had asked a great many questions about him, and what he was doing, and where he was, and when he would come home. Mother always answered their questions as well as she could, but as the time went on, they grew to speak less of him. Bobby had felt almost from the first that for some strange, miserable reason, these questions hurt Mother and made her sad. And little by little the others came to have this feeling too, though they could not have put it into words. One day, When Mother was working so hard that she could not leave off even for 10 minutes, Bobby carried up her tea to the big bare room that they called Mother's workshop. It had hardly any furniture, just a table and a chair and a rug, but always big pots of flowers on the windowsills and on the mantelpiece. The children saw to that. And from the 3 long uncurtained windows, the beautiful stretch of meadow and moorland, the far violet of the hills, and the unchanging changefulness of cloud and sky. "Here's your tea, Mother love," said Bobby. "Do drink it while it's hot." Mother laid down her pen among the pages that were scattered all over the table, pages covered with her writing, which was almost as plain as print and much prettier. She ran her hands into her hair, as if she were going to pull it out by handfuls. "Poor, dear head," said Bobby. "Does it ache?" "No, yes, not much," said Mother. "Bobby, do you think Peter and Phil are forgetting Father?" "No," said Bobby indignantly. "Why? You none of you ever speak of him now." Bobby stood first on one leg and then on the other. "We often talk about him when we're by ourselves," she said. "But not to me," said Mother. "Why?" Bobby did not find it easy to say why. "You," she said, and stopped. She went over to the window and looked out. "Bobby, come here," said her mother, and Bobby came. "Now," said Mother, putting her arm round Bobby and laying her ruffled head against Bobby's shoulder. "Try to tell me, dear." Bobby fidgeted. "Tell Mother." "Well then," said Bobby, "I thought you were so unhappy about Daddy not being here. It made you worse when I talked about him, so I stopped doing it. And the others?" "I don't know about the others," said Bobby. "I never said anything about that to them. But I expect they felt the same about it as me." "Bobby dear," said Mother, still leaning her head against her, "I'll tell you. Besides parting from Father, he and I have had a great sorrow. Terrible worse than anything you can think of. And at first, it did hurt to hear you all talking of him as if everything were just the same. But it would be much more terrible if you were to forget him. That would be worse than anything." "The trouble," said Bobby, in a very little voice, "I promised I would never ask you any questions, and I never have I. But the trouble, it won't last always?" "No," said Mother. "The worst will be over when Father comes home to us." "I wish I could comfort you," said Bobby. "Oh, my dear, do you suppose you don't? Do you think I haven't noticed how good you've all been? Not quarreling nearly as much as you used to, and all the little kind things you do for me, the flowers, and cleaning my shoes, and tearing up to make my bed before I get time to do it myself." Bobby had sometimes wondered whether Mother noticed these things. "That's nothing," she said. "To what? I must get on with my work," said Mother, giving Bobby one last squeeze. "Don't say anything to the others." That evening, in the hour before bedtime, instead of reading to the children, Mother told them stories of the games she and Father used to have when they were children and lived near each other in the country tailies. Of the adventures of Father with Mother's brothers when they were all boys together. Very funny stories they were, and the children laughed as they listened. "Uncle Edward died before he was grown up, didn't he?" said Phyllis, as Mother lighted the bedroom candles. "Yes, dear," said Mother. "You would have loved him. He was such a brave boy, and so adventurous. Always in mischief, and yet friends with everybody in spite of it. And your Uncle Reggie's in Ceylon, yes, and Father's away, too. But I think they'd all like to think we'd enjoyed talking about the things they used to do. Don't you think so?" "Not Uncle Edward," said Phyllis, in a shocked tone. "He's in heaven. You don't suppose he's forgotten us and all the old times, because God has taken him any more than I forget him? Oh no, he remembers. He's only away for a little time. We shall see him some day. And Uncle Reggie and Father too?" sighed Peter. "Yes," said Mother. "Uncle Reggie and Father too. Good night, my darlings." "Good night," said everyone. Bobby hugged her mother more closely even than usual, and whispered in her ear, "Oh, I do love you so. Mummy, I do. When Bobby came to think it all over, she tried not to wonder what the great trouble was. But she could not always help it. Father was not dead like poor Uncle Edward mother had said so. And he was not ill, or mother would have been with him. Being poor wasn't the trouble. Bobby knew it was something nearer the heart than money could be. I mustn't try to think what it is, she told herself. No, I mustn't. I am glad Mother noticed about us not quarreling so much. We'll keep that up. And alas, that very afternoon she and Peter had what Peter called a first-class shindy. They had not been a week at 3 chimneys before they had asked Mother to let them have a piece of garden, each for their very own, and she had agreed. And the south border under the peach trees had been divided into 3 pieces, and they were allowed to plant whatever they liked there. Phyllis had planted mignonette and nasturtium and Virginia stock in hers. The seeds came up, and though they looked just like weeds, Phyllis believed that they would bear flowers someday. The Virginia stock justified her faith quite soon, and her garden was gay with a band of bright little flowers, pink and white and red and mauve. I can't weed for fear I pull up the wrong things, she used to say comfortably. It saves such a lot of work. Peter sowed vegetable seeds in his carrots and onions and turnips. The seed was given to him by the farmer who lived in the nice black and white wooden plaster house just beyond the bridge. He kept turkeys and guinea fowls and was a most amiable man. But Peter's vegetables never had much of a chance because he liked to use the earth of his garden for digging canals and making forts and earthworks for his toy soldiers. And the seeds of vegetables rarely come to much in a soil that is constantly disturbed for the purposes of war and irrigation. Bobby planted rose bushes in her garden, but all the little new leaves of the rose bushes shriveled and withered. Perhaps because she moved them from the other part of the garden in May, which is not at all the right time of year for moving roses. There were visitors, too. Mrs. Perks came up to ask how he was, and so did the station master and several of the village people. But the time went slowly. I do wish there was something to read, said Peter. I've read all our books 50 times over. I'll go to the doctor's, said Phyllis. He's sure to have some. Only about how to be ill, and about people's nasty insides, I expect, said Peter. Perks has a whole heap of magazines that came out of trains when people are tired of them, said Bobby. I'll run down and ask him. So the girls went their 2 ways. Bobby found Perks busy cleaning lamps. And how's the young gent? Said he. Better, thanks, said Bobby, but he's most frightfully bored. I came to ask if you'd got any magazines you could lend him. There now, said Perks, regretfully, rubbing his ear with a black and oily lump of cotton waste. Why didn't I think of that now? I was trying to think of something as I'd amuse him only this morning, and I couldn't think of anything better than a guinea pig. And a young chap I know's going to fetch that over for him this tea time. How lovely! A real live guinea. He will be pleased. But he'd like the magazines as well. That's just it, said Perks. I've just sent the pic of to Snigson's boyum, what's just getting over the pneumonia, but I've lots of illustrated papers left. He turned to the pile of papers in the corner and took up a heap 6 inches thick. There, he said, I'll just slip a bit of string and a bit of paper round him. He pulled an old newspaper from the pile and spread it on the table and made a neat parcel of it. There, said he, there's lots of pictures. And if he likes to mess him about with his paint box or colored chalks or whatnot, why, let him. I don't want him. You're a dear, said Bobby, took the parcel, and started. The papers were heavy, and when she had to wait at the level crossing while a train went by, she rested the parcel on the top of the gate. Idly she looked at the printing on the paper that the parcel was wrapped in. Suddenly, she clutched the parcel tighter and bent her head over it. It seemed like some horrible dream. She read on the bottom of the column was torn off. She could read no farther. She never remembered how she got home. But she went on tiptoe to her room and locked the door. Then she undid the parcel and read. That printed column again, sitting on the edge of her bed, her hands and feet icy cold and her face burning. When she had read all there was, she drew a long, uneven breath. So now I know, she said. What she had read was headed, End of the trial. Verdict. Sentence. The name of the man who had been tried was the name of her father. The verdict was guilty, and the sentence was 5 years penal servitude. Oh, Daddy, she whispered, crushing the paper hard. It's not true. I don't believe it. You never did it. Never, never, never. There was a hammering on the door. What is it? Said Bobby. It's me, said the voice of Phyllis. Tea's ready, and the boys brought Peter a guinea pig. Come along down. And Bobby had. 2. Bobby knew the secret now. A sheet of old newspaper wrapped round a parcel. Just a little chance like that had given the secret to her. And she had to go down to tea and pretend that there was nothing the matter. The pretense was bravely made, but it wasn't very successful, for when she came in, everyone looked up from tea and saw her pink-lidded eyes and her pale face with red tear blotches on it. My darling, cried Mother, jumping up from the tea tray. Whatever is the matter? My head aches, rather, said Bobby. And indeed it did. Has anything gone wrong? Mother asked. I'm all right, really, said Bobby. And she telegraphed to her mother from her swollen eyes this brief, imploring message, not before the others. Tea was not a cheerful meal. Peter was so distressed by the obvious fact that something horrid had happened to Bobby that he limited his speech to repeating, more bread and butter, please, at startlingly short intervals. Phyllis stroked her sister's hand under the table to express sympathy and knocked her cup over as she did it. Fetching a cloth and wiping up the spilt milk helped Bobby a little. But she thought the tea would never end. Yet at last it did. End, as all things do at last, and when Mother took out the tray, Bobby followed her. She's gone to own up, said Phyllis to Peter. I wonder what she's done. Broken something, I suppose, said Peter. But she needn't be so silly over it. Mother never rose for accidents. Listen. Yes, they're going upstairs. She's taking Mother up to show her the water jug with storks on it. I expect it is. Bobby, in the kitchen, had caught hold of Mother's hand as she set down the tea things. What? Is it? Mother asked. But Bobby only said, Come upstairs. Come up where nobody can hear us. When she had got Mother alone in her room, she locked the door and then stood quite still and quite without words. All through tea she had been thinking of what to say. She had decided that I know all, or all is known to me, or the terrible secret is a secret no longer, would be the proper thing. But now that she and her mother and that awful sheet of newspaper were alone in the room together, she found that she could say nothing. Suddenly she went to Mother and put her arms round her and began to cry again. And still she could find no words, only, oh, Mammy, oh, Mammy. Over and over again, Mother held her very close and waited. Suddenly, Bobby broke away from her and went to her bed. From under her mattress, she pulled out the paper she had hidden there and held it out, pointing to her father's name with a finger that shook. Oh, Bobby, Mother cried, when one little quick look had shown her what it was. You don't believe it? You don't believe Daddy did it? No, Bobby almost shouted. She had stopped crying. Asterisk, that's all right, said Mother. It's not true. And they've shut him up in prison, but he's done nothing wrong. He's good and noble and honorable, and he belongs to us. We have to think of that, and be proud. of him, and wait. Again Bobby clung to her mother, and again only one word came to her. But now that word was Daddy. And oh, Daddy, oh, Daddy. Again and again. Why didn't you tell me, Mammy? She asked presently. Are you going to tell the others? Mother asked. No. Why? Because, exactly, said Mother. So you understand why I didn't tell you. We too must help each other to be brave. Yes, said Bobby. Mother, will it make you more unhappy if you tell me all about it? I want to understand. So then, sitting cuddled up close to her mother, Bobby heard all about it. She heard how those men, who had asked to see Father on, that remembered last night, when the engine was being mended, had come to arrest him, charging him with selling state secrets to the Russians, with being, in fact, a spy and a traitor. She heard about the trial and about the evidence letters found in Father's desk at the office, letters that convinced the jury that Father was guilty. Oh, how could they look at him and believe it? Cried Bobby. And how could anyone do such a thing? Someone did it, said Mother. And all the evidence was against Father. Those letters? Yes. How did the letters get into his desk? Someone put them there. And the person who put them there was the person who was really guilty. He must be feeling pretty awful all this time, said Bobby, thoughtfully. I don't believe he had any feelings, Mother said hotly. He couldn't have done a thing like that if he had. Perhaps he just shoved the letters into the desk to hide them when he thought he was going to be found out. Why don't you tell the lawyers or someone that it must have been that person? There wasn't anyone that would have hurt Father on purpose, was there? I don't know. I don't know. The man under him who got Daddy's place when the awful thing happened, he was always jealous of your father, because Daddy was so clever and everyone thought such a lot of him. And Daddy never quite trusted that man. Couldn't we explain all that to someone? Nobody will listen, said Mother, very bitterly. Nobody at all. Do you suppose I've not tried everything? No, my dearest, there's nothing to be done. All we can do, you and I and Daddy, is to be brave and patient. And she spoke very softly. To pray, Bobby, dear. Mother, you've got very thin, said Bobby, abruptly. A little, perhaps. And oh, said Bobby, I do think you're the bravest person in the world, as well as the nicest. We won't talk of all this any more, will we, dear? Said Mother. We must bear it and be brave. And darling, try not to think of it. Try to be cheerful and to amuse yourself and the others. It's much easier for me if you can be a little bit happy and enjoy things. Wash your poor little round face and let's go out into the garden for a bit. The other two were very gentle and kind to Bobby, and they did not ask her what was the matter. This was Peter's idea, and he had drilled Phyllis, who would have asked 100 questions if she had been left to herself. A week later, Bobby managed to get away alone. And once more she wrote a letter. And once more it was to the old gentleman. Dear friend, she said, you see what is in this paper. It is not true. Father never did it. Mother says someone put the papers in Father's desk, and she says the man under him that got Father's place afterwards was jealous of Father, and Father suspected him a long time. But nobody listens to a word she says. But you are so good and clever, and you found out about the Russian gentleman's wife directly. Can't you find out who did the treason, because he wasn't Father, upon my honor? He is an Englishman, and incapable to do such things, and then they would let Father out of prison. It is dreadful.